Hi everyone, my name's Janelle. I'm a functional nutritionist who lives and plays in the Sierra Mountains, and this is my podcast where we talk about functional health with a mountain twist in 30 minutes or less. Today, I'm talking to my wise friend, Jennifer Burrows. Jennifer is a certified clinical hypnotherapist and board-certified functional nutrition and spiritual health coach. Jennifer's personal health journey, alongside the transformative experiences of her clients, has underscored the critical role of healing the nervous system. Today, we're discussing how stress and past traumas impact our biochemistry and how we can settle the nervous system to improve how we function and heal. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome, Jennifer. I am absolutely delighted to have you here today to talk about really such an important topic. And you and I have been colleagues for several years and have even been able to work together in a few different ways, which I have really valued. I really love the depth and the pace that you bring to healthcare and the wellness world. So, thank you for that, for starters, and thank you for being here. But even in a holistic and functional world, I really still find people looking for that magic protocol or that supplement or that herb. And often we're really missing this big piece of the healing journey. So, to start us off today, I would love to read something from from one of the correspondences that we have had together. So, I'll read it now.
Okay.
It's quote, I have yet to find a client who doesn't have a story of either chronic stress, unresolved trauma, or emotionally impactful experiences. I've quickly learned the importance of addressing the nervous system regulation, that the body cannot and will not heal until that is addressed. So I would love, Jennifer, for you to start off by just telling us how you see this come up for people and or yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, Janelle. I just wanted to start off too by thanking you for having me, and I value you as well because you are amazing at what you do, just bringing that depth too to just health and wellness. So I would say, I mean, I really started out, I've always had a passion with nutrition and just being able to heal ourselves, but it's always been like supplements, nutrition, vitamins, those nutrients that we need. But what I quickly started seeing, even with something like weight loss, women would come to me for weight loss. And it's like 3 sessions in, there was so much trauma that was going on. And this is where I realized, okay, this is, diet or learning to eat differently. There's a lot more that's going on. And that's just who I started attracting. And I think when I went through my program with heart math, which heart math focuses on regulating the nervous system through breath work. That's where I really got to see firsthand using a sensor. It's like what a person's heart rhythm looks like, which
Mm.
is such a reflection of the health of the nervous system. You start looking at things like heart rate variability and coherence. And so for me, actually seeing that, because you can hear all of these different theories, but when you see it, it's very, very different. Um, Everyone that comes in, it's like there's so much going on in the heart rhythm. And in a perfect world, that incoherent state should only exist when we're experiencing anger and frustration and fear in the moment. But the problem is that we all have those narratives that are playing in the background, whether we're consciously aware or not. There's a certain level of anxiety, apprehension. Maybe we're ruminating about the past. All of that's going on. And so it really does take conscious effort to create that nervous system balance once again.
Yeah, you just said so much there. So, first of all, what I heard you say that was really interesting is that what heart math helped you see. So, heart math is, you can explain this better, but it's just a way of seeing what's going on inside your body in the moment. And you can explain
Yes.
that again in a second. But what you were seeing is that people's biochemistry, what was happening in their body, was totally changing just because of how they were thinking about something and their nervous system. So that right there is just so big. That's one reason I love tracking. With
Mhm.
any device that you use, a continuous glucose monitor or an Aura ring or an heart math, I just think that is so cool. Like, is it necessary? Maybe not. But that concrete evidence and seeing exactly what's going on can be so powerful, especially in this
Absolutely.
situation where people don't understand that stress response is so big and people don't even understand it's happening in them. So that already just blew my mind. So, can you just briefly describe how this works in heart math, like what the piece looks like, how you're tracking it?
Yeah, so when clients come in, I hook them up to a sensor and I'll just get a baseline of 1 to 3 minutes. And then I have them do the heart. There's two different well, actually, I should say there's several techniques to heart math, but the foundational technique is what they call the quick coherence technique, which involves heart focused breathing and then bringing in a renewing emotion and actually allowing your body to feel that emotion that you're trying to bring in. But I do this in two parts. I just do the heart focused breathing, which is just shifting your attention to your heart space and slowing the breath down. So each inhale and exhale is slowed down. That alone creates a
Mhm.
state of coherence and
Mhm.
increases the variability. Then that emotional piece that you bring in, whether it be trying to experience a state of calm, peace, joy, or gratitude, that's reprogramming the neural circuitry of the brain. Um, so people are always blown away. I have them do it for 3 minutes at the massive shift in just doing this for 3 minutes that they experience. And a lot of them are really surprised because like they know they have stress in their life, but when they're sitting there in my office, I mean, honestly, it's a comfy chair. It's a really peaceful environment with salt lamps. It's like they feel good when they walk in and they're surprised that even though they're not actively feeling stress, they're surprised at the difference in their baseline and engaging in the heart math breathing, the difference that it makes in their heart rhythm and nervous system.
Yeah, again, it's not necessary to do that, to get hooked up to a sensor or to use any of these tracking. But when you do, it is, I think, more validating for how
Yeah,
important it is to focus on stress and even that childhood, those, adverse childhood experiences, any form of trauma that you've had can be impacting your biochemistry and your healing journey, of course. And that's
absolutely.
obviously
Yeah, I
what
think it's
we're
like a
here.
big aha moment when you get to see it.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, this happens so fast. I discussed actually the heart math on my last call and I love it. I think it's the fastest way to change my biochemistry for sure. I've seen it, I can feel it. But what we're here to talk about is the fact that acute stress and stored stressors from our past
Mhm.
really can slow down our healing journey, whether that's digestion or autoimmune issues, or, no matter what it is, having that stress response, if you know about it or not, really can harm the healing process. So, you've seen in your practice how addressing this can help. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah, makes a huge difference.
And in your own journey also, correct?
Mhm. Yeah, and my own as well. I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Oh, I'm trying to remember. Almost 20 years ago. And I read all the books I could get my hands on, made all the dietary changes, and I was really disappointed because after 9 months of making all the changes that were recommended, there was absolutely no shift in my antibody
Mm.
level.
Mhm.
And it was very difficult to maintain because, of course, the rest of the family was, had a very different diet. And then I started, I think, looking into more of just the impacts of stress on the body. And then it's like, okay, I have had a lot of stress, but I felt like I was handling things okay. And I just think that when you look at stress and things that have gone on, people are affected differently. People might feel it more emotionally, so start maybe manifesting more symptoms of anxiety or depression, those sorts of things in other people. And I think I'm one of those people. We do a really good job at just putting it away and storing it in our bodies. So then it's like really start having the physiological symptoms. Um, and when I started addressing the stress in my life, that's when I started seeing major shifts in my antibody levels. And I was on medication for a lot of years, thyroid replacement hormone, and I got to the point where I was able to wean off. Don't need it anymore. It was actually, I think, putting me into more of a hyperthyroid state. So,
Wow. So you think that, I mean, you really felt that stress component addressing that had a big shift. So, like,
yeah,
the nutrition is so important, of course, the lifestyle,
absolutely.
having the nutrients, but it takes, I mean, this is like what we talk about in functional medicine, right? That
Mhm.
all things matter and all things are connected, and that everybody is different. Like you said, we all store our stress differently, we all process our stress
Yeah.
differently. So those three components really are so important when we're trying to get our body to function better for us.
Absolutely. And if you just look at what stress does, I mean, your nervous system is amped up. It's looking for danger. And so you've got that. And there's different aspects to the stress response. There's some people that get to that state where they're just in an exhaustive state. So they're not even in fight or flight anymore. They're just in a very frozen state. But that low level fight flight, that alone raises your blood sugar. It's going to contribute to inflammation because you have these inflammatory hormones that are just streaming through your body that are only meant to occur in a state of danger. But in our modern world, there's a lot of things that we perceive as danger that really aren't dangerous, but our brain just hasn't been able to adapt to the modern world. I think, even just things that we take for granted, like people that live in really big cities and have to deal with traffic all the time, they've acclimated to it, but that doesn't mean that it's healthy. It's just a lot of input that's coming in all the time in the nervous system. So you consider work, relationships, family, kids, and all the things that go with that. If you're not intentionally creating time to decompress, all of that just starts building and building and building to where the nervous system is just in a state of overload.
And I love that you mentioned the freeze. Like we're so familiar with the fight, flight, but then freeze is a big part of it too, and that can
Yeah.
be confusing for people to correlate, that response with a stress response.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then what about past traumas? I mean, that's a big part of this also, right?
Absolutely. And I think that even something like a past trauma, whatever, that experience is that you've gone through, it's going to create that need for safety. So it's like, even though you've moved through that and it's something that's in the past, but it's like it's there, it leaves a mark in the body. And so I think of like glasses that we put on, right? And there's these different filters that we look at the world through. And depending on what that trauma was, now there's a whole set, there's, a new filter that we have, there's new perceptions. And so as we're moving through the world, even just something that like can remind somebody of the trauma, it could be something that's familiar, it's going to reactivate that need for safety. And especially when in childhood, that's a really impactful time. And I think a lot of people think like, oh, well, I was little when that happened, so many years have gone by, it doesn't matter anymore. But really, I mean, for several years, up until around age 7 or 8, a child is in a theta state. And theta state that's a state that is induced in hypnotherapy. And that what that does, that brainwave the critical mind is kind of checked out. And so that's a very suggestible state. That's why children are so impressionable. They have so much imagination because they're basically living in a theta state for the first 7 to 8 years of life.
Wow, I
So
didn't know
anything
that.
that happens, yes. I mean, even if, home life is great, but let's say there's bullying going on at school or just other dynamics outside of the home, that again, it's like it's informing the nervous system and the brain so that, It's like, again, there's that need to stay safe, and that's been your experience. Those are experiences, and those are all associations that are developing at that subconscious level. So it really impacts how people move through the world even as adults.
It's just sort of overwhelming at how many different ways stress can impact us, because
Mhm.
there's all of that. And then when I knew you were coming on, I was looking at some PubMed articles even about how childhood stress and childhood trauma can epigenetically change our DNA.
Mhm.
But the cool thing is that because it's epigenetics, we can also do things to turn that DNA back on or off, whichever way we want
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's wild how much it can impact us on so many different levels. But then it's also really wild how much we can impact it. And that's what you specialize in, really.
Yeah, and I was gonna share something that's really interesting too. If you look at there are some documented cases of dissociative identity disorder that depending on what personality the individual is in, they have very distinct physiological issues that are going on. So there's one recorded case of this man that when
Mm.
I believe it was his 6-year-old personality, but he was highly allergic to orange juice to the point where he had hives that were like fluid-filled blisters, but they saw him transition into a completely different personality, and the blisters completely vanished.
Okay, that's just crazy
I
because
know, it's mind-blowing.
yeah, that's mind blowing. And so what you're saying is like, not that people, like, we all have multiple personalities, but the power of the mind
Yes.
in impacting our health. So what our nervous system, what's going on in our mind, how we perceive the world has a direct impact on our health and even how disease manifests in our body. I mean, that's just mind blowing.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and what I think is so cool, and I just wanna mention a book, it's Childhood Disrupted, but what I love about, everything she says in her book, it's like, yes, trauma impacts biology, but again, like you were saying earlier, because of epigenetics, we can also turn that around. It's not
Yeah.
set in stone. It's not like, okay, I'm a victim of this and now I have to deal with the consequences for the rest of my life. There's so much that we can do
Hmm.
to turn that around and heal.
Hmm. Right. But we just have to be active. We have to
Yes.
mindfully do
Yeah,
the work and make it
absolutely.
happen. Okay. So can we shift now and talk about ways that you think are helpful for people to impact this and address this?
Yeah. So, I mean, things that people can do at home on their own. I mean, honestly, like heart math, we talked about that earlier, but anything you can do to help regulate the nervous system. I think the next thing that I would say is rest. And
Mm,
that's a big one, just not just sleep. Sleep is obviously very important. um, but giving ourselves enough sleep, if you aren't sleeping well, definitely addressing that because there's so much that is being vented out during that active dreaming. So just think of, your sleep and now the brain is like processing all of that input from the day, old stuff. And so it's kind of like doing a cleanup on your computer, getting rid of old files you don't need anymore. That's what the brain is doing during that dream state. And if we can't vent out all that old stuff, do that disk cleanup, that also can contribute to overwhelm. And then I think just rest during the day where we live in a society that really values productivity. It's
mm,
a hustle culture and
mhm.
we just are not biologically wired for that. And I
We
think to
are
learn to
not.
be okay with that because I talk to so many women especially, I think we're in that nurture caregiving role because it's something that we've learned or it's expected of us and so it's always situations and people outside of us that get attention first before we give that attention to ourselves. And I talk to so many women that even just resting, they feel guilty and they feel like it's not productive. And that's huge.
And these things that you're saying, they're just not like sexy, like it's not
No.
a shiny protocol. It's not, it's too bad that it's so hard for us to do this because these things are so big. I love the heart math suggestion. Maybe I'll post a link on the podcast and on the YouTube channel for a short heart math exercise. If people are interested, they can find that. And then rest. Yeah, you said rest is so important, and sleep. So important, such critical parts of the healing journey.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when people hear that, they're like, "Well, that's too easy to be true," but
Yes.
it's so important to get back to the basics, like, what are the basics of health? And when you're resting and you're sleeping, there's so much repair that's going on in the body, and, just even that energy renewal for the next day or for whatever it is that you've got, going on. Even just if you can, like, a little 10-minute power nap during the day, that's a lot better than coffee.
Yes. And I don't know about you, or I mean, I do find this in other people too, because it's who I work with. But personally, for myself, I feel like I could fake it for a long time and do the grind and push, push, push and go, go, go and charge, charge, charge until my late 40s. And then when those hormones changed, I just
Mhm,
couldn't anymore. I found myself getting really bad sleep for the first time in my life, like
mhm.
horrible sleep, anxiety for the first time. And I was doing so much. And then it took really learning to rest, learning to sit on my swing. Because for me, I can sit as long as I'm on like a rocking chair or a swing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so finding what works for you, like what kind of rest works for you, what kind of breath work works for you, because there's so many different modalities out there. And it's not a one size fits all. You can, keep looking and find something that's helpful. Doesn't have to look like everyone else, but the
Absolutely,
rest part
yeah.
is key.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely, and I think that you said something really important there, that it's different for everyone, and that's also, when I talk to clients, it's like, okay, I have my things that I like and I recommend, but I always tell them, if you don't, feel free to find something else, or even if there's something about that one technique that you like, be creative and make it your own. Yeah, it's okay to do that. It's like we don't have to follow the protocol or the way that it's done precisely. You can make it your own.
Yeah. And I mean, I think recognizing in yourself, and this is when the tracking again is good, but again, you don't need it. But recognizing in your body when you feel that sense of total calm and
Yes.
peace. And just like, I just picture myself marinating in that. And then you can try things and see, okay, did I get to that place again? You know, and it takes
Mhm.
time and experimenting and open mindedness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like when you were talking about tracking, it's nice to see it in the beginning just because it's like, okay, this isn't just
Yeah.
an opinion. But even with something like heart math, they sell sensors that you can buy, but I always tell my clients, it's like, if you can do this without getting fixated on your score, then
Yes.
buy it. You're going to get fixated on your score, then you're creating a whole level of stress. And
Yeah.
most of them like, no, I'd get fixated on the score. That's like, no, then just you got to tune into your body.
Yes. So
Yeah.
it can help you do that if you have the opportunity, but it's not necessary. Well, I'm
Right.
laughing because last week I did a Qigong class and I do have an aura ring on. And I
Oh, yeah.
noticed that I was in restorative mode and I knew it, it felt good, but then I
Yeah.
just saw it and I was like, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
But
No,
I
it's
knew
nice to
it.
have that feedback. Yeah. But
Yeah.
ultimately, and like you said, it takes practice and that's so important with practice and what we're doing. Ultimately, what we really want to do is restore that communication with the body.
Yeah.
So when we are experiencing stress or discomfort, it's like we notice it and we feel it right away, and then we can go do something about it because our body tries to give us these cues, right? And like I tell my clients, the symptoms that you're experiencing is the only language that your body has to tell you that something's wrong.
Mm.
And when we constantly ignore or just put a band-aid on it, for anyone that has kids, it's like every time your child comes to try and tell you something, you just send them to their room, especially if there's multiple siblings involved. It's like it's not going to end well. They have something
Hmm.
they need to tell you.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing with the body.
So learning to tune in, listen, slow down long enough to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. I feel like so many of my podcasts, no matter what we're talking about, comes back to that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it really, I mean, we just, again, I'm repeating myself, but we live in a culture of productivity where it's like if you're tired or not feeling well, you still show up, you power through the day with caffeine or, power, other types of drinks. And it's just, it's so harmful because you're overextending your entire body. Like you were saying, when you're young, there's a lot that you can do when you're young because there's a lot of energy.
Mhm.
But it's not going unnoticed by the body.
Mhm. Mhm. Something's got to give.
Yeah. And just even with these, practices at home, such as, breath work, whether it's heart math or something else, you're really retraining the nervous system to respond differently to stress. And you're teaching the nervous system that it can be safe, even in an environment where maybe we don't feel safe, even just something like public speaking. I mean, I used to, I know this personally because I really struggled with public speaking. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. It was really bad.
Mm.
And my nervous system didn't feel safe, even though obviously I wasn't in any sort of physical danger, but I may as well have been in physical danger because that's how it felt to me. So just, rewiring all of that programming and bringing in different associations can make a huge difference.
That's really cool. I'm just thinking I might need to book a session with you. I have this funny thing from childhood that I know is real. And so I had some not very nice teachers growing up. I mean, I had
Mhm.
some wonderful ones, but
Uh-huh.
when I was really young, and still when I'm in a class like the one you and I took together or something, when I go to ask a question, I like blackout. Like my brain shuts off, my heart rate goes crazy, and I have so much confidence in what I do and how, my
Mm.
opinion in the world, and I teach classes, it doesn't bother me. But when I go to ask a question in a class, I literally turn into a second grader that is like peeing in her pants in her chair. I mean, it is so weird. And I have like tried to work myself through this and nothing works. So I think maybe I'm going to have to book an appointment with you.
Yeah, that would be awesome. But see, that just shows you it's like, what you're describing is not abnormal or uncommon. Again, a lot of
Mhm.
stuff goes back to childhood because we're so
Yes.
impressionable. So
Yes.
all that stuff we're taking in is going straight to the subconscious that creates
Yes.
a foundation. And then even though we intellectualize like this is ridiculous, I'm
I can
confident.
yes.
Why? Yeah.
Yes, I can be there
But
in class thinking,
yeah,
"Janelle, come on, you have something great to say." And I no
yeah,
longer have my thinking ability. It's gone.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because it's that emotional experience you had as a child takes over, and that's really what drives us. It's those emotional experiences, it's not the intellectual mind,
Right.
it's the emotions.
So, if there was something that you would want everybody to understand about stress and trauma and these adverse experiences and how they impact our health and healing, what would it be? What would you want everybody to know about this?
Well, I think what people really need to understand is that if the nervous system is not balanced, and obviously we can't expect the nervous system to be in a balanced state 100% of the day, but we need to have those tools to be able to bring it back into balance. When the nervous system isn't balanced, then every other system in the body will not be functioning optimally. So, your nutrition could be top notch, you could be taking the best supplements, but your ability to even digest your food, absorb and utilize those things is going to be compromised. Your immune system will be compromised because that's just not that you don't have the maximum capacity of your body's energy going to all of your systems that are required for health. So that's why for me, and when I work with my clients, it's just that nervous system regulation is the foundational component because then it's kind of like jumping from A to, Z and missing the interim. In fact, I want to highlight it's really interesting. Well, Heart Math has done a lot of studies, but one of the studies that really stuck with me was they had a police department from a certain city and they had separated them into two groups. The one group practiced heart math for a few months, the other group did not. And then they had this simulated training where they went into this dark building and they were having, rubber bullets shot at them and everything. And the group that had been using the heart math technique, their nervous system went back to a balanced state within, I believe, 25 to 30 minutes after the whole thing.
Wow.
And they recalled with really impressive accuracy all of the details, whereas the other group, I think it was like 2 hours before they got back to balance. Their memory, of what had happened was not nearly as good as the other group. So, even something like that, the fact that they could go through that whole simulation where, yeah, your adrenaline's gonna be up with something like that and then go back to balance, half an hour later is really impressive.
So the coolest thing is that you're saying, yes, this impacts your health, but yes, you can impact your stress and that stress response and your nervous system. So that's really empowering. Thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom and being so generous with all of your insights here.
Thank you, Janelle.
Bye bye.
Bye.
That's it for this week. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a comment and review, as that helps more people find out about it. You can find me and the courses I teach at mountainrebalance.com and on Instagram. If there's a topic you want to hear about, please reach out and let me know.